Well, I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that the Alaska summit produced something that the Russians found acceptable and that they're now irritated isn't being delivered to them. I suspect it's the territorial concessions in the Donbas. Uh, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov just gave an interview within the past day or so where he all but says that again.
Good afternoon everyone, this is Alex, and right now you can hear an air raid siren behind me in Kyiv, and we are once again without electricity, but moving on to urgent news. During talks in Abu Dhabi, the possibility of reaching a peace agreement in March and holding elections, a referendum in May, was discussed, Reuters report. The main stumbling blocks, of course, are the issue of Donbas and the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. Regarding Donbas, the position is well known and remains unchanged. As for the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant, it was stated that Russia rejected the proposal of US stewardship over the plant and the 50-50 split of electricity between Ukraine and Russia. Instead, Russia is now demanding to generate electricity independently and allegedly sell it to Ukraine at a low price. This proposal is unacceptable to Ukraine. Several sources familiar with the course of the negotiation described the US proposed timeline as unrealistic. There is also remark about today's attempt assassination of General Alexeyev. Ukraine's foreign minister Sybiha stated that Kyiv has no involvement whatsoever in this attack, and a number of factors indicate that this is indeed the case. Just today, I recorded an interview with a former US National Security Advisor and US Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, and listen what he said today about Abu Dhabi talks and energy ceasefire in Ukraine.
You have said that Putin is convinced of his victory through a war of attrition and may even believe that Trump has already promised him the Donbas. If Trump is truly unwilling to apply hard power and real pressure, is there any scenario at all in which this White House can force Putin to stop? Or are we now watching a situation in which Putin is simply waiting to Trump hand over under Ukraine under guise of a compromise? Because, as you have said, Trump doesn't care what happens 2 or 3 years after an agreement is signed.
Well, I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that the Alaska summit produced something that the Russians found acceptable and that they're now irritated isn't being delivered to them. I suspect it's the territorial concessions in the Donbas. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov just gave an interview within the past day or so where he all but says that again. And I think that's one reason that Trump is afraid to apply real pressure to Russia, that he did make that concession, which would be disastrous if true. And he's very much afraid that if he reverses his course, the Russians will make the whole thing public, and then he'd have real difficulty. Look, this puts enormous difficulty in the way of people in the United States who support Ukraine's efforts to maintain its freedom and independence. Obviously, the president has control of foreign policy, but there's enormous support in Congress. And what we find ourselves doing, I think, is following the lead of the Europeans, who keep saying we can negotiate this ceasefire. And I think people need to reflect on whether that really is in Ukraine's strategic interest, particularly for the next 3 years while Trump is still president.
Regarding the talks in Abu Dhabi, you noted that Trump's team is currently being pulled in opposite directions by Iran and Israel, and that Ukraine is a problem they want to close as quickly as possible. Is there a risk in Abu Dhabi Trump will try to impose a quick peace at the expense of Ukraine territory solely to add a line to his resume for the Nobel Peace Prize? And do you think that Putin is deliberately playing on Trump's vanity by agreeing to negotiations, using the time to regroup before a new offensive, just as you predicted?
Well, I think Putin is doing everything he can to avoid being blamed when the talks break down, which they will, and which I think they have in Abu Dhabi. There may be another meeting scheduled, but I don't anticipate it will change. But Putin is able to say, look, I continue to be willing to negotiate. It's these Ukrainians who are being unreasonable. I don't think the Iran issue necessarily plays into that, although we know from Trump's own comments that the readout of his last phone conversation with Putin, that Putin offered to be a mediator with respect to Iran, which would be another disaster. I do think you're correct to say that what's really motivating Trump is the Nobel Peace Prize. So to get that, he needs a deal that brings the conflict in Ukraine to at least a temporary halt. And he doesn't care what the deal is. He doesn't understand really what's at stake. He doesn't see the U.S. has anything at stake. So he's prepared to give away almost anything if he thinks he can make a deal. He doesn't want to apply pressure on Putin because, as I said before, Putin's his friend, and he doesn't want to wreck the friendship. Putin sees that, and he just pushes Trump as far as he thinks he can move him, usually successfully. Sometimes he's overreached, but usually he gets exactly what he wants.
Today on our program, we're joined by a very special guest, a former US National Security Advisor, a longtime foreign policy expert, and former US Ambassador to the United Nations, Mr. John Bolton. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks again for having me.
And finally, I would like to express my gratitude to all my subscribers and viewers, especially those who help improve my content and make it much higher quality, as well as those who consistently support me in the comments with your brilliant support, your brilliant kind words. I would especially like to thank my sponsor, Morgan Lamb, for the most powerful sponsorship support. Thank you, buddy. Go Ukraine, and long live hockey.